What happens when Star Trek's highest ideals slam into cold, brutal reality? Every legendary captain eventually faces the captain's test. That moment where they have to make an ugly, compromising choice, where doing the right thing could cost lives, principles, or even their own soul. In this video, we're examining 5 of those defining moments. James T. Kirk and the Kobayashi Maru, Jean-Luc Picard in I, Borg, Benjamin Sisko in the Pale Moonlight, Kathryn Janeway and Tuvix, and Jonathan Archer in Damage. We didn't choose these episodes because they're the most heroic or flattering. We chose them because these are the ones each captain is best known for. The incidents that have stuck in the cultural memory and defined how fans see them. The Kobayashi Maru is so iconic that characters in completely unrelated shows still quote it decades later.
The Kobayashi Maru.
What Kobayashi Maru it?
The Kobayashi Maru.
Kobayashi Maru.
Kobayashi Maru.
The Kobayashi Maru.
Kobayashi Maru.
Just Kobayashi Maru the whole process.
Mobakachi Kaboom.
In the Pale Moonlight is the episode people always point to when they say Sisko went dark. And Tuvix is the one everyone debates whenever Janeway's name comes up.
Doesn't anyone see that this is wrong?
These are the tests that fandom keeps coming back to. We're not here to rank who was best or worst. Instead, we'll break each decision down honestly. What did they stand to lose? What did they stand to gain? What was the real cost of doing nothing? And what were the totality of the circumstances? By the end, we'll see how differently each captain responded when the test came, and what that says about them. I'm your host, Liberty Delaney, and this is The Captain's Test. Let's begin. Number 5. James T. Kirk, the Kobayashi Maru. Like every Starfleet cadet, James T. Kirk faced the Kobayashi Maru, an academy simulation designed to be completely unwinnable. Its purpose was diagnostic, to evaluate a future commander's ability to handle inevitable failure and death. Yet Kirk, rather than confront that reality, changed the rules and reprogrammed the simulation so he could claim a personal win. And, when caught, Starfleet gave him a commendation for original thinking. There were effectively 0 real stakes. This was a controlled diagnostic whose only purpose was to evaluate a cadet's psychological fitness for command, and Kirk entirely dodged it. On a high level, it's like trying to beat a drug test or a lie detector. The test isn't there to be beaten. It's there to maintain standards of fitness. What did he stand to gain? Bragging rights, bravado, the satisfaction of never having to lose. The cost of doing nothing, of simply taking the test honestly, would have been revealing how he actually processes failure. The exact psychological data Starfleet needed. Best case, his result was indeterminate. Worst case, it showed a willingness to actively conceal his true response, rather than let the diagnostic do its job. This is the moral test Kirk is best known for, and it exposes something fundamental about him as a commander. His instinct, when faced with an unacceptable situation, is to reject or corrupt the frame itself, rather than engage with it. The franchise romanticizes this as a refusal to accept limits, but a colder reading might be that he simply behaves as though he is above the rules. Kirk was willing to subvert the system, even when the personal stakes were effectively 0, and Starfleet rewarded that behaviour. As a result, when he was later entrusted with a starship and hundreds of lives, the Federation had almost no reliable data on how he would actually behave in a genuine no-win scenario he couldn't rewrite or talk his way out of. Number 4. Kathryn Janeway, Tuvix. In many ways, Captain Janeway faced a more honest version of the no-win scenario than Kirk ever did. In Voyager's Season 2 episode, Tuvix, a transporter accident fuses Tuvok and Neelix into a single new being, Tuvix, who is fully conscious and self-aware. With no immediate way to reverse the merge, Tuvix joins the crew, and he isn't some abstract problem. Over the following weeks, he becomes a real person, helpful, gentle, even forming bonds with the crew, especially Kes. But when the Doctor finds a way to reverse the process and separate Tuvok and Neelix, Janeway has to decide. Restore the two men she's known for years, or let this innocent third life continue to exist. Tuvix, terrified, literally begs her not to end his life. When Tuvix resists, the Doctor refuses to perform the procedure on moral grounds. And when the crew looks to Janeway, there's nowhere for her to hide. She stood to gain the return of two essential crew members and the restoration of two lives that had been erased while under her command. But the cost of doing nothing, of letting Tuvix live, was equally devastating. It meant permanently erasing Tuvok and Neelix as individuals. Inaction wasn't neutrality, but a definitive choice. There was no victory here, no clever workaround, no third option. Janeway was forced to choose life or death, and she had to live with it. This was the no-win scenario without the safety net, a genuine moral bind with no good answer. Tuvix reveals a captain who accepts that sometimes command means making decisions that will haunt you, and Janeway refused to look away from an impossible responsibility. Number 3. Benjamin Sisko. In the pale moonlight. In the middle of a brutal, losing war, Benjamin Sisko made a deliberate and conscious choice to cross into darkness. In the Deep Space Nine episode In the Pale Moonlight, Sisko concludes that the Federation was lost unless the Romulans joined the fight. Rather than accept defeat, Sisko voluntarily commits himself to a dangerous shadow operation with Garak. What begins as a calculated compromise quickly spirals into something far darker. One deliberate step at a time, Sisko recruits Garak, releases a criminal forger from prison, bribes Quark, pressures Bashir into handing over dangerous biomimetic gel.
You should know that I shall note this in my log and file an official protest with Starfleet Medical.
Approves a forged holographic recording, and ultimately becomes complicit in murder and the assassination of a Romulan senator. At every single turn, he could have stopped. Instead, he rationalized each new compromise and kept pushing forward, even as the path grew darker and bloodier than he had ever anticipated. Sisko stood to gain the one thing that might save the entire Alpha Quadrant: Romulan entry into the war. The stakes could not have been higher: the survival of the Federation, potentially billions of lives. Doing nothing meant almost certain defeat. So Sisko made a calculated, deliberate choice: to fabricate evidence and lure the Romulans into the war. A just cause, to be sure, even if his methods were deeply sketchy. This is the most insidious of all the captain's tests because Sisko didn't stumble into moral compromise. He actively chose it and kept choosing it. He committed himself to a process of escalating, deliberate decisions, rationalizing every new line he crossed. Where Kirk cheated a simulation and Janeway was forced into a single tragic choice, Sisko willingly walked a path of gradual corruption, knowing exactly what he was doing. In the end, he sits alone and delivers the chilling line:
I think I can live with it.
That quiet acceptance may reveal more about him as a commander than any heroic victory ever could. Number 2. Jonathan Archer. Deep in the Delphic expanse, with Enterprise heavily damaged and running out of time, Jonathan Archer made one of the darkest choices of any Star Trek captain. In the Season 3 episode Damage, a passing Illyrian ship responds to their distress call, but cannot spare the one critical component they need: a warp coil.
I'm afraid that's one thing we can't spare.
After weighing his options, Archer deliberately chooses piracy, leading an armed boarding party, stunning members of the Illyrian crew, and stealing their warp coil by force, knowingly stranding the innocent ship 3 years from home. Stealing the warp coil gave Archer the only realistic chance he had left to continue the mission and stop the Xindi weapon before it could annihilate Earth. The stakes were existential. Doing nothing meant almost certain failure. Without the coil, Enterprise would never reach the weapon in time, meaning the annihilation of Earth and the corruption of the timeline that followed. Inaction simply wasn't an option. Yet Archer knew exactly what he was doing.
We need their warp coil. They won't give it to us, so we're going to have to take it.
He knowingly committed outright piracy against civilians who had been trying to help them. Alone in deep space, Archer became a thief and an aggressor. Now, this may be the most viscerally ugly thing we ever see a Star Trek captain do. Archer wasn't facing a simulation or a calculated conspiracy. He was the idealistic pioneer, the man destined to become the first president of the Federation, who looked at innocent people and decided to rob them at gunpoint because the stakes demanded it. The isolation made it even worse. They were completely alone, months or years from any help. The desperation was total. But so was the moral injury. Archer knew it was wrong, and he did it anyway. A fundamentally good man had to do something terrible, and that decision would either deaden part of his conscience or haunt him for the rest of his life. Number 1. Jean-Luc Picard. In the TNG Season 5 episode Borg, the Enterprise rescues a single wounded Borg drone. Picard, still deeply scarred by his assimilation as Locatus, sees more than just a survivor. He sees a weapon. At his direction, Geordi develops a sophisticated invasive program designed to spread through the entire collective like a virus and potentially destroy it from within. As they prepare the weapon, the drone, who comes to call himself Hugh, begins displaying clear individuality, personality, and fear. The moral question suddenly shifts from destroy the Borg to do we murder this person we have come to know? Picard stood to gain what every other captain in this series only dreamed of: a real chance to eliminate the Borg forever. The stakes were existential and universe level. The cost of doing nothing was leaving the Borg intact as an ever-present threat that had already nearly wiped out Starfleet once. And yet, once Hugh had regained his individuality, deploying the weapon would have meant deliberately sacrificing an innocent life. The choice became existential in its own way: justice versus mercy, with no clean victory available. Borg is unique among these tests because Picard wasn't forced into a crisis. He was presented with an opportunity and actively pursued it, until the opportunity turned out to be a person. Where Kirk cheated to avoid a test, Sisko willingly descended into darkness. Janeway was forced into a tragic choice, and Archer was driven by total desperation. Picard looked at the ultimate weapon against his greatest enemy and blinked. He chose mercy over what he believed was the only realistic path to victory, and, in doing so, proved that he was willing to live with the ongoing threat of the Borg. That refusal may be the clearest definition of who Picard is as a commander.
So, when you put these 5 tests side by side, they reveal 5 very different commanders. Picard and Sisko were both faced with universe-level existential threats. Both had a realistic path to a massive victory if they were willing to cross a major moral line. Picard said no. Sisko said yes, and kept saying yes, over and over. Picard and Janeway both faced the question of ending a single innocent life. Janeway did. Picard did not. Janeway, in many ways, lived the true Kobayashi Maru that Kirk cheated. She was handed a genuine no-win scenario with no good choice, only different kinds of loss. She didn't blink. She made her decision and stuck with it, even knowing she would regret it either way. Kirk, by contrast, dodged the one diagnostic designed to show how he would handle exactly those kinds of situations. Sisko and Archer both willingly chose the dark path, though in very different ways. Sisko methodically walked into corruption because he believed the greater good demanded it, while Archer, desperate and alone, committed a single ugly act of piracy because there was simply no other option. And then there's the provocative question some fans ask about Picard. Did he actually fail his test? In Borg, he had a relatively safe chance to cripple the Borg and passed it up. Yet years later, in First Contact, when the threat was immediate and personal, he was ready to destroy the Enterprise to defeat them. You could argue that his mercy wasn't strength, it was weakness. That he failed both Janeway's test and Sisko's test, and the galaxy paid for it again and again. So who really passed their test? Kirk dodged it, Picard refused it, Janeway accepted there was no good answer and made the call anyway. Archer and Sisko both made some controversial choices when the moment demanded it. 5 captains, 5 different answers to the same brutal question. What are you willing to become when the universe forces your hand? And maybe that's the real point. There is no single correct way to be a Starfleet captain. Only different ways to carry the weight. What are you thinking? Were we a wee bit harsh on Kirk and Picard? Were Sisko and Archer justified, or did they allow the darkness to overcome them? Let us know your thoughts below. Click like and subscribe. I'm Liberty Delaney, and this has been The Captain's Test.